The lens of my camera had always been my escape, my window to understanding the world beyond the cramped, suffocating walls of our modest family home in East Los Angeles. I'm Elena Rodriguez, 28 years old, and for most of my life, I've been fighting to prove that my dreams were more than just fleeting fantasies. Growing up, I was the black sheep, the daughter who didn't follow the well-worn path of factory work, early marriage, and quiet resignation that had defined generations of my family. While my brothers became construction workers and my sisters settled into administrative jobs, I dreamed of telling stories that mattered. Documentary filmmaking wasn't just a career for me, it was my calling. My latest documentary, Invisible Threads, explored the untold stories of immigrant workers, their struggles, their resilience, their invisible contributions that keep our society moving. It had taken me 3 years of painstaking research, countless interviews, and moments of near total despair to complete. When the Independent Lens Documentary Festival announced their prestigious Emerging Filmmaker Award, I thought everything was finally falling into place. This is my moment, I remember telling myself as I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the emerald green dress my best friend Maria had helped me pick out. It was vintage, with clean lines that spoke of sophistication, a far cry from the practical clothing I'd grown up wearing. My mother would have called it impractical, another example of my wasteful dreams. I had called my family weeks earlier, my voice trembling with excitement. "I've been nominated for the award," I'd said, hoping for a sliver of support. The response was a familiar mixture of silence and barely concealed dismissal. "Another film thing?" my father had muttered in the background. My mother's voice was flat. "Isn't that nice, mija?" But this time was different. This award could change everything. It was validation, proof that my unconventional path wasn't just a rebellious phase, but a legitimate career. The documentary had already been praised for its nuanced portrayal of immigrant experiences, giving voice to communities often overlooked. The morning of the award ceremony, I sent a group text to my family with the event details. Location, time, streaming link. I'd made it as easy as possible. "I really hope you can watch," I wrote, a small part of me still clinging to childhood hopes of familial support. Maria arrived to help me prepare, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to my family's indifference. She carefully pinned my hair, applied subtle makeup, and kept up a steady stream of encouragement. "You've worked so hard for this," she repeated, her eyes shining with pride. As we drove to the venue, I tried to quiet the nervous flutter in my stomach. The documentary wasn't just a film, it was a testament to the resilience of my community, a narrative that needed to be told. Each interview, each carefully crafted scene represented months of trust building, of listening to stories that had never been shared before. Little did I know that this night would be the beginning of a journey that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, and about the power of hidden truths. The spotlight burned bright, casting long shadows across the elegant ballroom. I gripped the edge of my chair, my emerald green dress suddenly feeling like a costume of false hope. Around me, other filmmakers celebrated, their families clustered nearby, arms intertwined, proud whispers, shared moments of joy. My phone remained silent. When my name was called, I walked to the stage with a practiced smile that felt like a mask. The award felt heavy in my hands. A beautiful bronze sculpture representing years of struggle, countless interviews, and the stories of those who'd trusted me to amplify their voices. My documentary, Invisible Threads, had captured the untold experiences of immigrant workers, giving depth to lives often overlooked. As I stepped to the microphone, I scanned the room. No familiar faces, no proud parents, no siblings exchanging knowing glances, just silence. My prepared speech caught in my throat, I'd imagined this moment so differently. My father's stoic nod of approval, my mother's quiet tears, my siblings exchanging looks of newfound respect. Instead, emptiness surrounded me. Later, scrolling through social media, the truth crashed down like a merciless wave. My entire family was at a reunion, a massive gathering they'd planned deliberately on the same night as my award ceremony. Photos showed them laughing, celebrating, sharing meals. Hundreds of miles away from my moment of triumph, a message from my younger sister Maria pinged through. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Family thing. You know how it is." How it is. Those 3 words carried the weight of a lifetime of dismissal. I remembered every conversation where my dreams were minimized. "Documentaries don't pay bills," my father would say. "Why can't you get a real job?" my mother would ask. Each critique, each subtle undermining had been a brick in the wall separating me from my family. But this was deliberate, a calculated erasure of my achievements. Backstage, surrounded by congratulatory colleagues, I felt something inside me shift. No more would I be the daughter who begged for scraps of recognition. No more would I allow their narrative to define my worth. Something had to change, and I would make sure of it. The key to my revenge was waiting. I just didn't know it yet. The key felt different when I first touched it. Cool metal, intricate engravings barely visible beneath years of tarnish. I'd found it while cleaning out my childhood bedroom, a mindless task meant to distract me from the pain of my family's betrayal. My grandmother's old dresser, a relic from another time, had always been a mystery. As a child, I'd been forbidden from opening its bottom drawer. "Some things are meant to stay hidden," my mother would say, her voice sharp with an emotion I couldn't then understand. The drawer stuck momentarily, then gave way with a soft groan. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light as I carefully removed years of forgotten memories. Old photographs, yellowed letters, newspaper clippings, and there, nestled in a small velvet pouch, the key. It wasn't like any key I'd seen before. Brass, perhaps, with intricate geometric patterns etched along its shaft. A series of numbers was barely visible, 04271953, a date that meant nothing to me at first. The weight of it felt significant, like a secret waiting to be unraveled. Beneath the key, a folded piece of paper caught my eye. The edges were brittle, the paper so old it threatened to crumble at my touch. Carefully, I unfolded it, my documentary filmmaker's instinct for preservation kicking in. The handwriting was elegant, clearly from an older time. Each letter was carefully formed, telling a story before I could even read its contents. "To my dearest Elena, the truth is not what they told you. What was taken can be reclaimed. The key is both a promise and a path. Trust nothing but the evidence. Abuela Magdalena." My breath caught. My grandmother had known something, had prepared something, and she'd left it for me, specifically for me, the granddaughter who'd always been different. The date on the key, 04271953. I recognized it suddenly, my grandmother's birthday. But why would she leave such a cryptic message? What truth was being hidden? My mind raced. My documentary skills kicked into overdrive. This was more than a family secret. This was a mystery waiting to be investigated. The same determination that had driven me to tell immigrant stories now focused on unraveling my own family's hidden narrative. Something significant had been kept from me, and I was going to discover exactly what it was. I pulled out my laptop, began cross-referencing dates, searching for connections, old family records, property documents, inheritance papers. Something was hidden, and I was going to find it. The key felt warm in my hand. A promise, a weapon, a key to everything. Research became my obsession. Every waking moment not spent on my documentary work was dedicated to unraveling the mystery my grandmother had left behind. I transformed my small studio apartment into a war room of investigation, with corkboards, timelines, and interconnected strings, mapping out my family's hidden history. My first breakthrough came through my great-aunt Rosa, my grandmother's younger sister. She lived in a small retirement community in Tucson, a woman who had always been marginalized by the family but maintained a sharp mind and even sharper memory. "They never told you?" Rosa asked, her weathered hands trembling as she clutched an old photograph. "About the property? The inheritance?" Piece by piece, a stunning narrative emerged. My grandmother Magdalena had inherited a significant piece of land from her parents, property that would be worth millions today. But somehow that inheritance had disappeared, quietly appropriated by my father and his brothers. "Your grandfather wasn't even aware," Rosa whispered. Magdalena knew, but she was silenced, told to be a good wife, to not cause trouble. Each revelation felt like a knife twisting. My family hadn't just dismissed my dreams, they had a history of systematic suppression, of stealing opportunities from those deemed less powerful. I dug deeper. Property records, old bank statements, whispered conversations with distant relatives who had been cut off from the family for asking too many questions. A pattern emerged, a deliberate, calculated erasure of women's rights within our own family. My documentary skills proved invaluable. I knew how to build a narrative, how to gather evidence, how to construct a compelling story that would withstand scrutiny. I began collecting digital and physical documentation, creating an airtight case. Maria became my ally. A lawyer specializing in property rights, she helped me navigate the legal complexities. "This isn't just about money," she told me. "This is about generational justice." I reached out to other marginalized family members, cousins, aunts who had been pushed aside, their stories silenced. Many were hesitant at first, afraid of retribution. But as I shared my evidence, a network of support began to form. My plan took shape. I wouldn't just expose the truth. I would do it in a way that would force my family to confront their decades of manipulation. My documentary skills would become my greatest weapon. I would create a documentary about my family's hidden history. Not just a personal story, but a broader exploration of generational theft, of how power is maintained through silence and manipulation. The key my grandmother left wasn't just a physical object. It was a metaphorical key to unlocking years of suppressed truth. "They thought they could write me out of the story," I told Maria, my voice steady. "But I'm going to rewrite the entire narrative." Each piece of evidence was a weapon. Each hidden document a potential bomb waiting to detonate. My family had no idea what was coming. The first strike came subtly. I premiered a rough cut of my documentary at a small independent film festival, carefully weaving the story of generational land theft with broader narratives of family suppression. The audience was stunned, not just by the personal story, but by the systemic patterns of familial oppression I had uncovered. My father was the first to react. The phone call came late one night, his voice a mixture of rage and desperation. "You're destroying our family," he growled. "What gives you the right?" "The truth," I responded coldly. "The same truth you've been hiding for decades." The backlash was immediate. My brothers began a smear campaign. Social media posts painting me as a traitor, a troublemaker who was airing dirty laundry. They tried to discredit my work, calling the documentary a fabrication. But I was prepared. Each accusation was met with documented evidence: bank statements, property records, sworn testimonies from extended family members who had been silenced for years. I had built my case like a documentary, layer upon layer of irrefutable proof. My Aunt Rosa became a key witness. Once marginalized by the family, she now found her voice. "For years, they told me to be quiet," she told journalists. "But no more." The local media picked up the story. What had started as a family dispute was now a broader conversation about generational wealth, property rights, and the silencing of women's voices. My family's social standing began to crumble. Business connections started to distance themselves. The community that had once protected their narrative now questioned everything. My mother's attempt to intervene was perhaps the most painful. She showed up at my studio, a mixture of desperation and anger in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Family is family." "Family doesn't steal," I responded. "Family doesn't erase." Each revelation was strategic. I wasn't just exposing wrongdoing, I was dismantling a carefully constructed facade of respectability. The documentary became more than a personal story. It was a weapon of truth. Legal challenges followed. My brothers attempted to sue for defamation, but every claim was backed by mountains of evidence. Maria, my lawyer, was relentless. Each legal maneuver they made was anticipated, countered. The pressure began to show. My father lost contracts. My brothers' businesses faced scrutiny. The family's carefully maintained network of influence started to crack. But this was about more than financial retribution. It was about breaking a cycle of silence, of oppression that had defined our family for generations. Distant relatives began to reach out, cousins, aunts, uncles who had been pushed aside. They saw themselves in my story, recognized the patterns of manipulation that had defined their own lives. "We stand with you," they would message me. Each message was a small victory. The key my grandmother had left was more than a physical object now. It was a symbol of liberation, of truth-telling, of reclaiming what had been stolen. My family had no idea how completely their world was about to change. The final act began at the annual Latino Business Leadership Conference, an event my family had dominated for years. I knew this was my moment, the culmination of months of careful planning and evidence gathering. My documentary would premiere here, in front of the very community my family had manipulated for generations. As I took the stage, the room fell silent. The same ballroom where I'd been ignored during my award night now buzzed with anticipation. My family sat in the front row, a united front of fear and desperation. "This is a story about theft," I began, my voice steady. "Not just of property, but of dignity, of generational opportunity." The first frames of the documentary hit like a thunderbolt. Carefully documented evidence of land appropriation, of systematic exclusion, of how my family had built their wealth by stealing from their own relatives. Bank records, property deeds, sworn testimonies. My father's face went ashen. My mother gripped his hand, her composure cracking. But this was more than just an exposé of my own family. The documentary framed their actions within a broader context of generational oppression, how immigrant families often cannibalize their own, how power is maintained through silence and fear. Halfway through the screening, my eldest brother attempted to interrupt. "Lies!" he shouted, standing up. "This is all fabrication." Maria, seated nearby, was ready. She handed him a folder. Certified legal documents that completely undermined his claim. The room was electric. Community leaders, business owners, journalists, all watching a family's carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. A hidden trust fund, established by my grandmother decades ago, had been systematically drained by my father and his brothers. Not just our family's inheritance, but funds meant to support multiple extended family members' education and opportunities. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars, redirected, hidden, stolen. As the documentary concluded, the room erupted, some in shock, some in anger, some in a kind of horrified admiration at the depth of the investigation. My family sat in stunned silence. The legal implications were immediate. State investigators were already being contacted. The local district attorney's office showed interest in a full investigation. But this was never just about money for me. It was about breaking a cycle of silence, of giving voice to those who had been systematically erased. During the Q&A, a woman from the audience stood up. Her hands were shaking. "My own family did something similar," she said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing us it's possible to speak." More stories began to pour out. Other families who had experienced similar betrayals. A collective wound was being acknowledged, addressed. My grandmother's key, the physical object that had started this journey, sat in my pocket, a symbol of the truth waiting to be unlocked. As cameras flashed and journalists scrambled, I caught my mother's eye. For the first time, I saw something beyond anger, a mixture of respect, of recognition. I had not just exposed my family's secrets. I had transformed a personal story of betrayal into a powerful narrative of community, truth, and redemption. The Rodriguez family would never be the same again. 6 months after the documentary's release, my world had transformed completely. The legal proceedings had been brutal but conclusive. My father and brothers were facing significant financial penalties and potential criminal charges for years of financial fraud. The recovered funds were being redistributed to the extended family members they had systematically marginalized. My grandmother's key now sat in a small frame on my desk, a reminder of the journey that had brought me here. Surprisingly, not all connections with my family were severed. My mother reached out unexpectedly, asking to meet. Our first conversation was tentative, filled with years of unspoken pain. "I was afraid," she admitted, "afraid of challenging the system that kept us surviving." I understood now. Survival had often meant silence for our immigrant family. My documentary had broken that cycle. The film went on to win multiple awards, but its true impact was beyond accolades. It sparked conversations about generational wealth, family dynamics, and the hidden stories within immigrant communities. Other families began to reach out. Support groups formed. People found courage in my story, realizing that speaking truth could be an act of liberation. My next documentary was already taking shape, not a story of revenge, but of healing, of understanding how systemic oppression works within families, within communities. The key my grandmother left was more than a physical object now. It was a symbol of transformation, of finding voice, of reclaiming stolen narratives. I had entered this journey broken, dismissed. I emerged powerful, connected to a broader community of truth tellers. Some wounds never fully heal, but some stories demand to be told.